In 1994, Orange County, California, filed for the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history, $1.7 billion in losses, not because of fraud, not because of a rogue trader, because the county treasurer, Robert Citron, had been borrowing at short-term rates and investing in long-term bonds. For years, he looked like a genius. Then, the Fed raised rates 6 times in 12 months, and the whole structure collapsed. Pension funds wiped out. Schools cut teachers. And when investigators asked Citron how he made his decisions, he admitted he had been consulting a psychic and a mail-order astrologer. That is the actual court record. Here is the part that should disturb you. The same structural bet that destroyed Orange County is sitting inside most Americans' retirement accounts right now. Not the astrologer part. The part where you are carrying long-duration interest rate risk without knowing it, and everything looks fine until it does not. My name is Tom. I spend way too much time reading the mechanics behind things that appear safe until they stop being safe. If you have a target date fund, a bond allocation, or any fixed income position inside your 401k and you have not thought hard about what rising interest rates do to those positions, subscribe and give this a thumbs up. By the end of this, you will understand why the conservative part of your retirement portfolio might be its most fragile component, and you will have a concrete protocol to do something about it. Let me start with a concept almost nobody actually understands: duration. Not how long you hold something. In finance, duration measures how sensitive a bond's price is to interest rate changes. Here is the simplest version. You own a 10-year government IOU, paying 2% a year. Rates rise to 5%. Your 2% IOU looks terrible against what new buyers can get. So if you tried to sell, buyers would only pay a steep discount to make your bond's effective return match the new rate. That discount is your loss. And the longer the bond's duration, the bigger the loss. A 30-year bond is roughly 3 times as sensitive to rate moves as a 10-year bond. Here is the problem. In 2020 and 2021, rates were near zero. Fund managers chasing any yield at all loaded up on longer duration bonds, because longer duration was the only way to extract returns. Target date funds, the ones your HR department enrolled you in during week 1, were doing the same thing. The 2040 fund, the 2045 fund, all quietly accumulating duration risk under the label of safety. The word conservative was in the marketing. The interest rate sensitivity was not. Then 2022 happened. The Fed raised rates at the fastest pace since the 1980s. In 2022, the aggregate US bond market had its single worst year on record. Not one of its worst ever. Standard long-term bond index funds dropped more than 30%. The supposed safe part of portfolios was losing money faster than many stock allocations. People 5 years from retirement who had shifted toward bonds for protection watched their conservative allocation get hit hard. The Citron comparison is direct. He borrowed at short-term rates and held long-term bonds because it looked good on paper, and nobody questioned it, while rates were stable. Millions of 401k holders did the same inside target date funds, while nobody explained the risk. Same structure, same blind spot. The county went bankrupt. Most retirement accounts did not go bankrupt, but they quietly bled in a way most people never connected to the mechanism. They blamed the stock market. It was not just stocks. You might think rates already went up, that already happened. Here is why it still matters. We're in a fundamentally different interest rate environment than the one your retirement account was designed around. For 40 years, from 1980 to 2020, rates fell in a long, slow arc. Bonds quietly appreciated the entire time. The classic 60-40 portfolio worked beautifully, not because it was a timeless law, because it was perfectly suited to a 40-year bond bull market that is almost certainly over. Think of it this way. Imagine a board game where the dice are slightly weighted in your favor. Not obviously, just enough that over hundreds of rolls, you win more than you lose. You start to believe you understand the game. Then someone swaps in normal dice. Your strategy did not get worse. The environment changed. That is the bond market today. The passive tailwind that made long duration look safe is gone. And if your portfolio was designed for the old dice, you are carrying risk that does not show on your statement. Let me put real numbers on this. Meet Kevin. He is 58, earns $95,000 a year, and has been contributing to his 401k for 25 years. He has $480,000 saved. His HR system auto-enrolled him in a 2030 target date fund. Over time, the fund shifted toward what its prospectus calls a conservative allocation. By 2021, that meant roughly 45% stocks and 55% bonds, heavily weighted toward intermediate and long-term treasuries. In 2022, Kevin's bond allocation fell nearly 18%. His stocks also dropped. His total portfolio went from around $510,000 to $480,000. He was confused because he thought he had gone conservative. Conservative in that fund, in that moment, meant heavily exposed to duration risk in a rising rate environment. Kevin is now 7 years from retirement and behind where he needs to be, not from any behavioral mistake, because the product he was enrolled in was built for an interest rate world that no longer exists, and nobody told him. This is the trap. The word safe is doing enormous work. In everyday language, safe means your money will not go down. In finance, safe means low credit risk, meaning the borrower is unlikely to default. It does not mean low price risk. Duration creates price risk entirely separate from creditworthiness. Long duration U.S. government bonds carry zero default risk and substantial price risk when rates rise. The industry understands this precisely. The marketing to retail investors erases the distinction. Here is the 3-step protocol. Step 1. Find your actual duration exposure. Log into your 401k tonight. Look up the average duration of your bond holdings. Most fund company sites show this in the fund details. If your bond allocation averages above 7 years of duration, you have meaningful rate sensitivity. Above 10, the exposure deserves a deliberate decision. Step 2. Shorten duration if it is too long. Consider shifting some of your bond allocation towards shorter duration alternatives. Short-term treasury funds, money market funds, and TIPS carry much lower duration. You give up some yield. You dramatically reduce price risk. In 2022, while long-term bond funds dropped 30%, short-term treasury funds dropped less than 4%. That gap is entirely explained by duration. Step 3. Separate the concept of safe from duration permanently. Short-duration bonds in a stable or rising rate environment are relatively safe. Long-duration bonds in a rising rate environment are not. Once that is clear, you stop letting a fund label do risk analysis on your behalf. Here is the bigger picture. Citron was not a criminal. He was not reckless by the standards of the time. He was operating a system that had always worked, inside an environment where the rules quietly changed and nobody forced him to confront that. That is the real danger, not fraud, not malice. Structural mismatch between what something was built for and what the environment now requires. Your retirement account was built for declining rates. You're living in a different world. The question is whether you notice before the divergence becomes a loss you cannot recover from on your timeline. 3 things to take away. First, duration risk is not theoretical. It showed up in 2022 in ways that shocked people who believed they were being conservative, and the conditions that produced it are still in place. Second, target date funds are not a substitute for understanding your own exposure. They are defaults built around average assumptions, and your specific situation is not average. Third, shortening duration is not pessimistic. It is mechanical. It is the same adjustment that could have saved Orange County if anyone had been paying attention to the rate environment instead of praising the returns. The financial industry will not bring this conversation to you. Admitting that their most popular product category was mismatched to the rate environment is not a comfortable sales pitch, but you can have this conversation with yourself tonight, before you keep trusting that the word conservative is doing a job it was never designed for in the world we are now in. See you in the next video.